We were just gonna start by showing some stuff from a recent trip and to Tanzania, and I'm just gonna present that now. So, as far as I know, let's see. Hopefully, that option to join the presentation is up there now.
Yep.
You guys into that? You see the first slide, which is it just says Kodakov in a burlap bag there.
Yeah.
Is that good, Dan?
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay, good. Great. Yeah, so I'm just doing this directly from Adobe Lightroom, which I hope works. Dan and I kind of tested it a few minutes ago this morning to make sure that it was actually functioning. But yeah, I went on a trip a couple weeks ago, and I just got back, and I'm going to ignore the Rwanda portion. I've been to Rwanda a lot, done a lot, but I don't get to Tanzania that much. And the weird thing is that Tanzania, while being really famous for coffee, is actually a really difficult place to work for various reasons. So I visited mainly this one company called Kodakov. It's part of Sukafina Group, and they have a huge warehouse in Dar es Salaam, which is a port city that they export coffee from, humid, low. So there's no coffee in the area. And in fact, here, I wonder, these are some of the samples we had for cupping because I was a little bit early for the season. So we were actually going to look at older coffees just to get some ideas of what the quality was looking like. But I don't know if you guys can see how this coffee has a kind of whitishness to it. And that's actually the look of age. This is a Robusta, right? Yeah, it's a Robusta there. But that's sort of not the best coffee. But what I'm going to focus on in the first part of this is the coffee mill and the fact that I got to cup a lot of low-grade coffees and see a lot of parts of the coffee trade that I don't really get to see, which is to me is really fascinating. I actually get really interested in the commercial side of the trade, and a lot of these things here are. Oops, go away. There you go. These are the incredibly low-grade coffees that come out of a coffee mill. Some of these could come from coffees that come in as really defective, poorly picked or not even selected coffee. And some of them come from really good lots. They're just the stuff that gets removed. But this is an incredibly bad sample. I mean, I think if you showed this, if you know what good green coffee looks like, what you're roasting, and you showed these pictures to people who drink instant coffee and said, this is actually what you're drinking, they may not want to drink instant coffee anymore. And these are just the full cherries. They're usually real small that make it through the system. And this is just husk, which they wanted to sell. The guy who took over this mill was trying to figure out how to sell it as cascara, but it's like this is completely unclean. And cascara tea is like you consume it directly, so it's not a good product. I don't know. But this warehouse is really impressive, just the size. I have a little video here. I'm just amazed. Is this the video? No, this is right here. If you look at these stacks, I was like, oh my God, they're perfectly stacked. I think I show a little gap between these stacks that is you could pull out a ruler and measure the millimeters between them. And in a lot of ways, that's Ross, who's the main director there. He's from Australia. And this is some of the low-grade coffee. That's a low-grade Robusta. And this is all the stuff that's left over that they're trying to sell at the end of the season. And let me just scrub through this a bit and see if there's any other interesting parts. I guess I didn't show the stacks, but these are some of the grades of coffee that are like left over. One of the grades they call grinders. I think I go into that later, but I'm not clear what grinders actually are because I don't really eat fast food. I think they're little hamburgers. But grinders in coffee are green coffee that's so broken and bad that nobody would want to see it as whole bean coffee. Um, it would be disgusting looking. I mean, it would look like garbage. So it's sold to people who only sell ground coffee. And the absolute lowest grades of coffee here, actually, and I don't mean to disparage anyone here, but they go to street coffee in India is a huge buyer of Tanzania low grade coffees. So this is kind of a modern coffee mill in Dar es Salaam. And I wanted to show that because I'm going to show you something. I love coffee history. And I got to visit a really, really old coffee mill that is like a skeleton of what it used to be. But I'll get to that in a second. I wanted to show you guys this thing. It's really strange. Dan, I know I didn't even talk to you about this. This is a coffee analysis machine. And I was just on their website looking. It's by a company called C-Smart. And it's an AI, it's a device that has like a neural network that it builds profiles of green coffee to predict quality from green coffee. You are scanning green coffee. It does very multi sort of pronged analysis of the coffee, including moistures, densities, etc. And let me just show this a second. These are the two people that work at the mill. I think it's Regine and Letitia, and that's Ross. And they are building their own, basically, database of coffee quality by, and the main reason this is really important for a mill like this is that they, during the auction season, will have like 800 coffee samples coming in per week that they need to analyze. And they need some way to help them with that. So this is the device, and they scan green coffee, they cup it, they cup certain types of coffee, they enter in scores and feedback to the machine. And then it starts looking at all these different aspects of it physically and builds it builds a predictive database so they can know what some coffees will cup like. Ross was telling me the main thing that they're really looking for from this device is not to like replace people, but it's to focus their energies on coffees that might be good and quit spending all their time tasting all these coffees that are horrible. So, you know, it's very interesting because, you know, a small specialty roasting business might cup and roast like 5 samples a week or something. Our business, we do maybe 30 samples a week, some weeks a lot more. But 800 a week is just insane, the amount of work involved. It takes a huge crew to do that. Anyway, I want to show you, I went up to Moshi, Kilimanjaro area, which is actually an area where we don't really look for coffee. It's a very traditional, old-time coffee area, but there's less and less coffee there. So it's the Kilimanjaro area. And we visited this coffee mill called TCCC, which is Tanganyika Coffee, Tanganyika Coffee Processing Company. I don't know where the P disappeared there, but it is called TCCC. And what's so fascinating about this place is it's something built in the 70s, or at least the last equipment updates are from the 70s. And there's these giant electric generators driving these huge mills, which are on huge leather belts on these giant wheels with these old types of density sorting, etc. And the entire place, it's like a museum. Probably a museum that very few people, besides myself, really want to visit. But what's staggering is it's a vertical warehouse. Is that a video? It's 4 floors. And if you know anything about, like, I'm sure you might, about, you know, American urban industrial period, or probably a lot of countries, you know, the whole thing was to build vertical industry near rail lines, almost in the neighborhoods, around, for example, in Oakland and Chicago, and you have manufacturing and houses almost mixed in a lot of ways. And this warehouse really reminded me of that. You have a rail line that comes directly into the warehouse, which I'm not sure I have a picture of. This is one of the old way bridges, an Avery scale, same company, Avery, but a manual scale, which this is the front. Yeah, there it is, TCCC Ltd. This is their receiving dock. And this entire place, this is the real kicker here, is this used to process all of the coffee for East Africa. In other words, all of the coffee from Congo, from Rwanda, from Burundi, from Tanzania, and much of the coffee from Kenya used to come here to process. It had that kind of capacity. This is their cupping room, which, as you can see, it's just desolate. Oops, that's the end of it. But just staggering capacity, and it's basically empty. The guy that we were going around with, this guy Peter, I didn't get a good picture of him. Really intelligent, nice guy, but he's the director of it and the engineer, so he actually goes and fixes all the equipment. Wow. And there's like 15 people working in the whole place, and I couldn't estimate how many square feet this facility is. It's massive. So it was a really interesting contrast to go from one mill to the other. And this is another part of the kind of coffee industry that fascinates me. This is the Tanzania Coffee Board, where all of the coffee is cupped and put into auction. Their cupping lab, I think I'm showing this here, has 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's another one over here, 5 banks of sample roasters there. And I'm not sure they really use them all. This is actually the bidding room, and this is still actively used, even though it's a digital platform. So this is where all of the coffee from the country goes through the auction here. They had these amazing old cast iron probats too. They still did some roasting, but as you can see, it's all very sort of not well used and not well taken care of. But there's a kind of charm in it. So anyway, I wanted to pause there a second and find out if you guys had anything, comments or questions about this sort of old industry of Tanzania. Oh, and I wanted to tell you, so when I was saying that was the Tanganyika Coffee Processing Company. I guess I didn't get that quite right. Tanzania, I did not realize this, is a condensed name of Tanganyika, which was the one nation or region, and Zanzibar. So in independence, they joined and formed the name Tanzania. And that was actually new to me, that it was Tanganyika and Zanzibar. It's a really basic thing that I never actually occurred to me. So let me find out if you guys have any questions about any of that.
Well, the belts and like that are very indicative of, the 1920s or something like that, 1930s. If you go to very old mills or very old plants in the early industrial revolution, they were big. They were steam and belt, and then they got electric, but they're still driving the belts. And so there's that belt stuff is 1880s to out even 1930s.
Well, what's funny is, the belts, we still run leather belts. I have an order in for our coffee roaster because they're really forgiving. And so if there's imperfections, they'll take up vibration and stuff. And
they slip well too. So there's a lot of those slip too. So there's a lot more compliance than like if you think of the belt that drives in your car or whatever. I happen to be an automotive engineer, so
really?
They have a lot of slip and they have a lot of play in them, and so they can. They almost do the purpose of a flywheel in a sense.
Actually, the next thing I was gonna say was that the way they slip is, and then So you can explain that. I don't know. As you get to a certain rotational speed, they grab, um, and that's kind of a gentle start. And sometimes on our old machine, when you saw something in the cooling tray, you could actually grab the arm and let the belt slip and grab something out. And then we switched to one that had a direct drive cooling tray. And I found out the hard way that I couldn't grab the arm and pick out a coffee bean because it just kept going and just ran over my fingers. So.
Well, it's a matter of the belt warming up probably and changing some. It's been polished up and therefore it has to warm up and get a little more compliant, get a little more grip to it, I would think.
Well, that's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think that level of equipment and the fact that you can have equipment that successfully does its job for 40 years, 50 years is
well, yeah, and you know, if you're going to revive a place like that, it wouldn't really make sense to go in and replace it wholesale. It would make sense just to try to update some of the stuff so that it's more reliable. But you know, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, it still does the job, but it was for me a really interesting contrast to see this in one sense what I thought was a pretty good use of an AI device to save a lot of labor, but also to refocus labor where it really needed to be on the highest quality coffee in the case of this C-Smart device. And I couldn't even fully explain it. I went to their website and they actually don't have this particular device on their site, and so I couldn't understand because all the different types of measurements it was taking. I know it does water activity, moisture, and density, but that's not really that much. We can all do that pretty simply ourselves. So,
well, you know, is it just a thing that it's basically it's smarter than eye cupping because it's artificial intelligence? Is it possible to do that, or is it just a hustle? Is it just a very crude differentiator?
well, I mean, I think the combination of all the inputs you're putting in, and then the fact you go back and taste it and relate that to the physical qualities on many sort of different aspects, and then build this model. I think it's the combination of the not just what the device can measure and tell you. It's the data behind it, and then relating that back to predicting quality. The thing I would wonder is, can it be wrong? Because coffee as an agricultural product is really complicated and confusing. And for example, sometimes you have a terrible farm that you go to it looks awful. They do everything wrong, and they win a cup of excellence because I don't know why. And they won't do it next year because they're not doing anything that's repeatable. But there's something in agriculture that things happen that I don't know if they're that predictable sometimes with all of them. But
it's interesting though to have a machine like that in the service of saving on workload, because I think about trips that we take where, Colombia, for example, where we have these really heavy cupping days, and there's often you're faced with these 20 sample tables, several of them back to back, and you smell something and you just know right off the bat that it's not a coffee that you're going to buy, so you sort of push it to the side. And this takes us one step further up in the process where it predicts, there's just this, how the predictability sort of helps in that effort to prune that stuff out ahead of time.
What's funny too is that any old time coffee trader, they used to, people did not taste coffee. They bought coffee, they just put it in their hand and they looked at it and they said, yeah, that's going to be good. And so there's an interesting way that there was a kind of experience and predictability in that, but that was something somebody, that was ingrained in somebody over a long life of experience.
And that gets back to the correlation process of using it actually running it.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily say that, it's not excluding great coffees.
Yeah, that would be very interesting to know. But
Hey,
the thing too, Dan, and I think I'd make this point is, when we go to a mill, and this is really, I don't mean to totally undercut our job and what we do, but this is a kind of bigger picture thing. Is they've already chosen. We already
yeah.
There's a whole process of elimination. For example, all the places that exporter doesn't even go look for coffee because they know there's very good, bad, or coffee in a certain area. They know they don't have the altitude. They know they don't have the cultivars. So they're just simply not looking for coffee. Um, or, for example, that they're only going to present us certain coffees. They've already done a screening in a sense. They just know, that a coffee mill, they may have 50 other samples. And so, like, just don't show those to sweeteners. They're not going to buy them. So we show up, and we're actually just already looking at a very top
Sure.
percentage that we're choosing. Now, what the picture, I think, of these coffee mills, the two that I visited, that so awakens me mentally is that this is all coffee. This is everything. This is the pieces that they sweep off the floor. This is the stuff that falls on the ground that they pick up. And you almost kind of applaud the utilitarianism, like no coffee's wasted. It's all sold. This is a case where like capitalism really works because it's like takes everything that can be used and uses it. Um, and maybe I think under the ICO agreement in the old days that they actually had to destroy that coffee because it brings down the value of all the other coffee. I'm I I'm not totally sure about that, but you had export limitations. A country could not export more coffee than they were allowed to. All they could do was store it or destroy it or sell it locally. And but if you do just say this coffee I swept off the floor is actually garbage, then you're not introducing so much coffee into the market to sell, and that could help support a more stable price. That was the idea under the ICO. So.
Hey Tom, since we're getting towards 9:30, I actually had a question. We haven't really had a chance to catch up since you've been back in Tanzania about this trip. But did you visit Ilomba? We launched that Tanzania, or we're launching it today, and I was wondering if you had a chance to visit that farm or a cooperative rather.
No, that was the choice we had to make. Is that the flights down to Mbeya in the south, which is where I think we're seeing better coffee. You couldn't make it there and back. They don't go every day. So in the time I had, I was coming a little out of season, and you just basically couldn't make it down to Ilomba. But that coffee, arrived. It's really nice, and I think that Mboshi and Mbeya is where we're seeing really the better coffee. And a lot of the coffee, I mean, I visited some farms, small farms that have higher quality, that were higher elevation up in Moshi area, in Mamera and Rombo area. And there's some possibilities, but one of the things that was really funny is the co-ops up there are really, they're old co-ops and they're not all well run. So they may have good coffee, but they tend to play a lot of games and selling it, and they promise it here and promise it there. And so we talked to them for a long time. This place is amazing. This is going to be great coffee. And then I found out towards the end of the conversation, they had defaulted on a loan. they had promised coffee to two different people the season before. So it introduces this thing. It's not just about finding good coffee. It's also about finding someone reliable who will do what they say. And in that case, that co-op, they were kind of speaking out both sides of their mouth. So interesting.
On that note, Ilomba, they sort of came out of the TechnoServe initiative, right? So like that happened in East Africa, the coffee initiative that they launched.
It's that NGO, and they do two things: is they send in business advisors, and they train locals to be business advisors for the co-op, as well as doing the agronomy and quality improvement, and helping with the coffee mills to build more consistency. And that's really amazing, is that they actually really prioritize business advice. Like, people can have a great product and just squander it and not get the most out of it. So, co-op's got to learn how to be an effective business. And that what I found out in Tanzania a lot is that there's a pretty good political system, and they have very charismatic local politicians and leaders, but they're not good business people. Um, this is what the criticism I was hearing from them. So they tend to get into positions in the coffee co-ops, and they get everyone on board. They're really good with the community, but they're just really bad at business. And anyway, that was an interesting point somebody made.
Hey, Tom and Dan, what coffees are you excited to see which has been coming down the pipeline? Like how are whiskey or farther down the road?
Well, the Yemens just landed, and they're on the list. Yeah. That was exciting.
We launched our first one Wednesday, so from Bani Haraz or Harasi, and we have another. I think Matari is next week, and then we have a really nice smaller peaberry lot that we picked up this year for the first time from this exporter that we've been buying from Perla Tahama, and it's a blend of peaberries from the different regions that Fatum, the woman who runs Perla Tahama, is working in. So I think it's like 30 bags, and Yemen coffee is exported in very small bags, at least what we're buying. So these are 30 66-pound bags, so it's a pretty small amount of coffee. So that comes in 2 weeks. This time of year is really busy for arrivals for us, though. I mean, all of our Central American
the Burundi samples that you actually roasted, like it's probably almost 2 weeks ago, and I cupped them. They're really old roasts, and I took them home. I was cupping them just to catch up on things I missed on my trip. Mm-hmm. These are the new arrivals.
Oh, right.
It's so good that I did a little blend, just brought it home. But it's funny because I almost never drink coffee that's more than like 7 days old or something. But this is really holding up after a few weeks.
That was 3 weeks ago almost. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. When you were gone.
Cheers.
Yeah. I feel like another thing we should just mention before we break away. We've passed the 9:30 mark, and I think we're trying to keep these to just a half hour. But we are rolling out a new QR code label system. So starting with next week's new coffees, we're going to have QR codes on the labels that link back to coffee reviews, and hopefully in the future we can have those linking back to other sort of informational pieces. So I think we'll be staggering how this rolls out with our current inventory, and essentially as coffees need to be filled, they will be filled with those new labels. So you'll start seeing that in orders probably next week. And then we're also we just rolled out a printable one-sheet coffee review. So if you go to our coffee records now, you'll see there's a new tab all the way to the right that just says print. It's essentially, we've had a lot of inquiries from customers who want printable labels is something that we get requests for from time to time. Someone buys 20 pounds of coffee. They want to roast several bags and label those bags, or label a storage bag. And so we get these requests for extra labels, which has been, I think in the old days, we used to be a little more equipped to honor those requests, and we still try to when we can, but it's become a little bit more difficult with our current workflow. So we've started thinking about doing some sort of printable label online, and that sort of turned into a one sheet. So it's, I
actually just started sharing it, Dan. I think we're learning Discord, so we forget that we could actually just show these.
Oh,
things.
So we have to watch stream again?
I was just I just was sharing it here on the Burundi Masha, and you go down and there's a new tab that's just print. And I think, one of the things is that it's just going to open a window to print, and this is not the exact format. It'll print. There it is. Yes, let me just cancel that. But Yeah, so you basically just click print and you get sort of a label. It's a little bit different shape, but it's going to have all the information. And yeah, we're hoping that people find that useful. We've heard this feedback for a long time that people wanted something, especially the extra label, but we didn't want to burn a sheet of paper on people's printers just on that. So what we did was stop sharing that. We just thought we'd throw in everything that might be useful so you can keep that sheet around if you want it and not have to go track it down again. And any coffee that's sold out, you can still, the QR codes will still work, the reviews will still be online, and you can still print. So
You won't, you won't see it on all of the out of stock coffees right now. We've just sort of backfilled what's live, but I think you can expect to see that for archives coffees going forward.
Yeah, from now on, this will be it. So.
Yeah.
I saw it. Is there some chat on that?
Does anybody have any questions that they want to?
Yeah.
Oh, I think you're muted. Let's see. Can I unmute you? Go for it. Oh, wait.
I got it. Yeah, I threw up a couple of things in the chat. Nothing's huge at all. I didn't have any big questions. I like the history stuff and the behind-the-scenes look that you gave it, Tom. Appreciate that very much. Maybe I'm neat, but yeah, I do like it. Love what you guys are doing. I was wondering if you were going to tell us anything about the Tanzanians that are likely to come to market for you soon.
Yeah, that Ilomba is really nice. And it's kind of unique because instead of building a container with a ton of small lots, we kind of went for the one coffee that we thought was really good, and it's a coffee that we can get year after year, hopefully, because they actually have their act together. So that, in the case of Tanzania, was really important, and
that'll be available today. I think we'll. By
launching.
Yeah, probably around noon or so today.
Yeah.
It's 100-bag lot, so it's a sizable lot. Like Tom said, we sort of went big on a single, sure thing rather than spreading it across several different coffees this year so far. So,
yeah, great. We should probably just wrap it up, but I would. I'd love to hear either here in our chat channel, our general text channel, what people are interested in for this. We're trying to feel out like what works here. I was thinking we could do some specifically on different types of roasters, and I'd love it to be much more interactive and just be listening more to what people have to share, questions they have. I thought of doing one on the popper roaster to go over some things and hear what people have to say. But yeah, we want to kind of come up with what this is about with listening to what people are interested in focusing on. With this one, we kind of just thought we wouldn't know how it would go, so we just wanted to kind of present more than interact. But
Tom, I've got a couple of questions maybe for the future.
Sure.
I've been running a Beanmore for years now. I used to build my own.
Yeah.
And I've got the Variac, and I've got the I can't remember what it's called now. The amp tracer. The
water.
Yeah, thank you. And I can replicate a profile in there based upon it. I'm experienced in the machine. But I'll hit an Ethiopian, and then I won't get it again, even though I'm running the same wattage, the same time, hitting the same marks. Now the Beamer doesn't have a beam probe, and the other thing is that especially Ethiopians, they don't weigh out right at the end. It'll weigh burnt, but it will color as a full sitting.
Depends, yeah.
Dan, you know what this reminds me? We should really put moisture levels into their Ethiopia reviews. Because I think what you're experiencing is the fact that some Ethiopias, they're a complete anomaly. Coffee should arrive about 10 to 11% moisture reading. We have Ethiopias that will come in at 8.5%. Any other coffee would be terrible if it did. And Ethiopians are magical that they work. They're also a very different density. So I think you may be experiencing a different in moisture and density. Moisture loss would be less if you're starting out with less moisture.
Coloring.
And coloring too. Color too.
Especially if it's dry process, the coloring is going to be quite darker.
Yeah, and I've got the card, and I've got your little magic card, and I check it against this and check it against that, and it's like, I can just tell this coffee is not there. And the one roast I really stuck that says, that's the coffee, was a short hot roast, which doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, but
That's where I go with Be More, almost for every coffee, for better or for worse, but definitely with something that I want to sort of bring out the dynamic characteristics. I'll go, as hot as I can get it, and as short, a shorter roast in order to bring out acidity.
Yeah, you've always got to watch out for that overheat at 7.5 minutes.
Yeah, you must have a 1600 AB, or is it? Not the black. Is it? It's not a black one.
Original ones.
Yeah. Because you can't really hit the overheat so much.
But I put the board in it. Then I got whatever the current was that was available that Joe had a lot of extra of, without the drums. And so I don't think it's necessarily an AB, but it's sort of more of a modern one.
Yeah. I have something like that too. You can't really overheat them. I mean, I think you can if you really try overheat the new ones. But that's maybe a whole other topic that we should have.
I've normally been able to put it on P5, and I don't keep it below the 325. It will shut it down. I think this one's a little more tolerant.
We should do a Be More office hours. I think that would be that would be
that would be great.
Yeah,
really fun to join, but. The comments on the Ethiopians and the Be More, I'm doing the exact same thing, finding the exact same issue. So this is awesome.
Let's do it.
Thanks for that.
Let's do the next one on Be More.
Sounds good. Yeah.